When I started getting well emotionally, when I overcame chronic anger, when I was off of all mental health medications, off of anything for depression, off of anything for hormone dysfunction or thyroid dysfunction, it started to just uncover and unlayer how deep this stuff could really go.
Right.
All right. Episode 1, the Mind Change Podcast. This has been years in the making.
Years. In your mind for a long time.
In my mind for a long time, yes. And then we've even had the equipment for years, and it's finally happening.
Here it is.
Here it is. All right.
So yeah, we're going to jump into this. And man, there's so many good things that we're going to start with to really help people understand what this is all about. But let's start out by just talking about what is mind change.
That's such a great question. And part of the reason actually we're even doing the podcast, right? Is to help people understand what mind change is. It has forever been a bit of an issue trying to explain to people like what it is that we do and what the mind change method is, even after an entire book has been written.
Right.
So the thing that we would like to say is that it's a mindset. It's a set of skills and tools that help put the power back in our hands for health, for happiness, for well-being. And then it's also so much more.
Right, because it's not just, let's just change our mindset and really just focus on good things, right? Because then there's still all of that, which we'll talk about in a minute, stored trauma, problems, issues, defaults, the stuff that's going on in our brain and our body. So it's not just, let's just change your mindset. It's so much bigger than that, right? So help us understand a little bit more about how this came to be, because it's been years in the making, not just the podcast, but mind change in and of itself.
Right. So we're going to go into this a lot more in detail as the podcast progresses. But basically, this modality and method was birthed out of me nearly dying.
Right.
And being diagnosed with innumerable, rare, incurable diseases.
And this was over a decade ago, but had lasted for over a decade prior to that, right? Kind of getting worse
I'd been
and worse.
Chronically
and we'll
ill.
talk about that. And
yeah, I'd been chronically ill for many, many years. And it had just gotten progressively worse. And I had tried everything. Really felt like I had tried everything. I had gone the Western medical route. And again, we're going to get so much more into this. But this was really birthed out of how to change, how to make changes. And so my first foray into this was an EFT-based modality. EFT is emotional freedom technique. And I learned that I might have more power over what was happening to me than it happening to me. I might actually have something to do with it. And I just was ready at the time. I was finally ready to hear it. And that started this ball rolling. And so I really dove into that for a while, and then started to realize, even though I had seen great strides in my life, there were other people it wasn't working for. It started to become limited in my life as more stuff came up and out.
right, because mind-body connection, even though this was one of your first like really deep dives into the mind-body connection, was not a new thing.
Right.
And many people had done different modalities and different strategies and different methods over centuries and millennia, right? But for you, this was kind of the first big thing. But tell me, what is it that kind of kept you going deeper, and how did you go deeper, and what was it that mind change really was derived from overall?
So I'd gotten enough taste that things are changeable.
Right.
That was huge for me, because I had really come from a victim mindset, a trauma story, just all kinds of addiction issues and abuse issues and all of these different things.
Things that happened to you or things, whether that's physical ailments, physical abuse, relational things. It's things that happen to you.
Right. That I felt like were done to me. I'd
Right.
been a victim of.
And staying there.
Yeah. And then what I didn't know at the time was, even though my life looked so different, I was married to a wonderful man, I had great children, I was not in any active addiction or anything like that. My life looked good, but I was dead sick. Like, I was dying. Not so slowly at that point either. And so there was still a victim story happening, even though I had tried so hard for it to be different. So that's when this just mind-body connection really clicked for me. And I realized there's something to this. So after kind of going as far as I felt like I could go with EFT, I started studying other things. I became really curious on why the things worked when they worked, but also why they didn't when they didn't work.
Right, because there's some people that will swear by a certain modality, right? Whether that's EMDR or, DNRS or EFT or, yoga or a certain diet. Like, people will swear by it. And then you get the other side of people who have done the same exact routines and swear the opposite direction. Like, this is the worst thing, or this made me worse, or whatever.
Didn't work for me. Or it worked a little bit and then it didn't work for me. So
Right.
there's this constant story. And so I thought there must be some key to why these things work when they work and why they don't when they don't work.
Right.
So at that point, I had this freedom to become kind of a armchair expert, and just researched. I started taking courses and classes and just diving in, and it new things just kept opening. So I initially studied EFT, then NLP, some hypnosis, and then got some really great pieces from all of that. Then I started reading and listening more to Joe Dispenza, which opened up the meditation piece of it, but then also like the quantum aspect of this.
Brain waves, all this other stuff. Yeah.
Right. And then that led me into, okay, I think I need to learn more about the brain. So I started doing some neuroscience research, took some courses there, took a Harvard course there, and really just collected as much information as I possibly could.
And the cool thing was that the more you were researching this, at that time, especially in the 2000 teens, so much new neuroscience was coming out and continues to come out, right?
Yes.
And so it was such a great timing of the scientific world and your deep dive.
Yeah, and the quantum mechanics were starting to be used more from this like out there way, and really brought into like, this could actually apply to the everyday man.
Right.
And so as I started gathering all this information, something finally just clicked. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got it. This is why it works. This is how to make anything work. This is how to change anything.
Wow.
And so while it clicked for me, you still have to, sort of like, is this going to work for anybody else? I don't know.
Right.
It made sense in my head. Everything it was like when the puzzle pieces finally come together and you take a step back and you're like, oh, that's it. And then you kind of second guess yourself and wonder, like, I'm just kind of a nobody here, don't have all these letters behind my name and college degrees and all of this stuff. How is it that I am figuring this out? Am I really figuring anything out?
Well, I think part of it was experiential, right? There's a lot of people that are doing research and things, but not necessarily for the problems or issues they had or have, right? It's more theory and a lot of other, which is great. But you were able to not only get the research and the understanding, but experientially input it and try it out and figure things out. And I would love to ask you, because obviously you've talked about coming from this place of physical ailment, and that's kind of what really got you into the deep dive of what Mind Change is now. But who is Mind Change really for? Is it for those who are at their tail end, like I've tried everything and these are the physical things I have, or is it broader than that?
Well, I didn't honestly think it was broader than that at first.
Right.
Because I was coming through a lens of chronic illness and I just wanted to heal.
Of course.
What happened. And again, like everything has come through the lens of my own experience. So I realized when I became well very quickly, radically well, and I will completely go into and share my story about that. But I realized, oh my goodness, there's so much more that I didn't want to just be well anymore.
Right. It started out as, I want the symptoms to go away.
Yes.
And that's what most people, like when most people are deep diving into anything, it's because there's a problem that's at the surface, right? And they just want that thing to be gone or done or whatever. But as you went into it and as these things cleared, it wasn't just healing anymore. It was evolving. It was raising your consciousness. It was really becoming this new person from a different ideal, from a different point of view.
Right. Which could only have happened after I got over that initial hump of, I don't want to die at such a young age and leave behind these young children and husband. And that was my motivation at first. When my body stopped doing all these symptoms, and from a medical perspective, I was well and I was feeling good. Yeah, that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I can take this so much further.
And isn't it true that, and again, you're going to talk about this in another episode, but isn't it true that the parts of you that became well, it wasn't just managing, right? Which is a lot of what the medical world does, but it wasn't just managing the problems. But when you were well, it's almost like some things in your brain opened up to, wait, I'm not just getting well physically. I'm actually becoming well emotionally, relationally, spiritually, like all of this stuff coming together.
Well, I would say I didn't know how sick I was.
Because
I
it
knew
wasn't
my
just
body
physical,
was
right?
sick.
Yes, absolutely.
But I didn't realize how much my body was actually holding and representing for me from an emotional standpoint, from heartbreak, from trauma, generational, ancestral trauma. I had been carrying so much for so long, but it was my norm.
And it became your environment, right? Even in
all
our
I knew.
marriage and in our, I mean, it just is what it is.
It's all that I knew. When my body started healing, it started giving me an opportunity to see other areas that I'm like, oh, this isn't optimal. This isn't like, it's like growing up thinking everyone has a stomach ache after they eat because that's all you've ever known.
Sure.
Which was my case of this kind of stuff that I was eating, and I always had a stomach ache. I didn't know what it was to not have a stomach ache. That was my norm. So then you get the stomach aches go away, and that's like, this is miraculous. But then you realize, man, my back hurts. It's like, it's the unlayering and the uncovering.
Right.
And again, I thought at first it was all just physical. So that's, and then when I started getting well emotionally, when I overcame chronic anger, when I was off of all mental health medications, off of anything for depression, off of anything for hormone dysfunction or thyroid dysfunction, it started to just uncover and unlayer how deep this stuff could really go.
Right. So let me ask you then, for those, listening and kind of diving in here, whether they're new or familiar, is this simply for the physical problems, or is it broader? And I think the bigger question is, who is Mind Change for?
Yes. Well, we like to say anybody, of course. It can be for anybody. Through the research and realizing this was really working for me, if you see someone who's on the brink of death and then they quickly and miraculously change, it got the attention of other people.
Sure.
And so I had friends that were like, hey, would this work for me? And actually my first client, and we'll hear from her.
Who's now a practitioner.
She is now a practitioner, yeah. She came for insomnia. Now, while insomnia could be seen as a physical, issue, I was like, I don't know if this will work. Let's see. And we started using, these techniques, and obviously they've really grown and morphed and changed over the 10 years I've been doing this. And within one session, 5 years of chronic insomnia changed overnight. She slept like a baby that night.
And of course, that's the only client that we've ever had that's happened to.
Well, not now. I didn't think about doing this. That's the other thing. Mind change was not mind change at that time.
Right. It wasn't like a career. It wasn't like,
No.
oh, this is what I'm going to do and help people and, all of that.
No, I was still on full disability because I had been so sick.
Right.
I wasn't trying to make this into a business. I had a job. I didn't think that that's what I wanted to do. But then more people started coming to me. And really from a research perspective, frankly, I was like, I don't know, let's see. I don't know, let's see. People started coming with all sorts of things.
They were the guinea pigs.
Everyone was a guinea pig at that point, right? And I was like, and they knew they were being guinea pigged on because I was like, I don't know, let's see. So then we were having fears and phobias and allergies, and then just people who wanted to have a better relationship with their spouse or a loved one, or, it was just
People in grief.
fear of
people
flying. I remember very early on, another friend who was like, I'm petrified to fly. Like, will not get on a plane and it's affecting my life. And I'm not going on vacations with my family. And do you think this would work? I don't know. Let's try. One session, bam, she was on a flight in a month, I think, like that. Anyway, so then I started to be like, oh, this can work for everything.
Right. This is bigger.
Because of that little secret sauce. And it's not super secret. I wrote a book about it, right? I decided a book needed to be written because I didn't want to just hold this information.
Well, that's a great point, because even one of the reasons we're doing the podcast, and one of the reasons that the books are out there, one of the reasons that, right, like the whole idea is this isn't something that like, oh, we really just need you to, come to us and follow this one thing. And no, our goal, why don't you say what the goal is? What's your tagline even?
The tagline is changing the world one mind at a time.
Right. And, for those of you who have read the book, or maybe you'll get the book after this episode, you'll know that the whole idea is you have it inside of you to transform anything. And it's not up to depending on someone else or depending on some certain thing. Your brain, your body, you are wired for what neuroscience now calls neuroplasticity, but not just something that happens naturally. We actually can hack it. We can get in there as individuals and change anything. And we're going to hear obviously a lot more about that.
So much about that. Yeah, that's that sort of secret sauce, which really to lay out there is, and this has become 10 years ago, you would never have heard this.
Right. It was
subconscious.
Crazy. It was crazy sauce back then.
Right. Subconscious reprogramming, subconscious rewiring. You would not have heard that 10 to 12, 15 years ago.
Right, because even someone like Freud, obviously, he believed in the subconscious. It's been talked about for centuries, right? I mean, this whole idea, but tapping into it.
Right, and even what it was and how, there has just been, the debate still rages, I would say.
Sure.
But the understanding that it's our wiring that has everything to do with our thoughts, feelings, choices, emotions, that if you can change that, anything can change.
And we're not talking about a metaphoric wiring. We are, but we're also talking about an actual neuroscience brain rewiring, the neural network that's going on in our brain that, as we'll continue to talk, is connected then to our heart, right? I mean, all these different parts of our body. So It's an actual transformation.
Definitely. It's change. And I will say, obviously, like I mentioned, things have really grown and progressed. We stay flexible. We stay plastic in our learning.
Yeah.
So new research comes out, we're on it.
Yeah, and we're not going to stay in one mode, right? We're constantly learning even within mind change.
Right. And the beauty of this is because of being an armchair expert and that it was my own life that I was using, it's not that reductionist way of thinking that because I'm not narrowed into neuroscience, narrowed into the brain. And I will say for a while when I nerded out on all things brain.
Can you explain just for our audience, what is reductionist thinking? What does that mean? What is it? How is it applied in the medical or the mind or the body world, just this world? What does that mean?
Sure. And it's been it's been helpful. But what that is, reductionist means it's where the famous way of explaining this is when you get, 20 scientists together to study an elephant, but you give one just the trunk. You give another just an ear. You give another just the tail. You give another, and that's all that they see. That's all that they're focused on.
It's all that they're researching, all that they're knowing.
Right, and they'll know everything about the trunk of the elephant. But then how do you consider, when you try to ask them what the elephant is as a whole, it doesn't come together.
Right. Or in medical field too, right? Someone who specializes. Now, this whole reductionist theory or idea was a good practice at one point, right? I mean, it's important for people to specify like, hey, we really need to hone in on this, right? And even therapy and psychotherapy and things, at one point it was just, this is a doctor. And then they decided, ooh, what's going on inside of the mind is like really important. And then they had people kind of zoom in on that. But the problem was then the medical field, the psychology field, and any other field you want to talk about became what?
Reductionist.
Exactly.
It's good. It's helped. And I'm so grateful for the pioneers in all these fields that went before
100%.
and gave us all this research. The problem is they're not talking to each other. And so you have someone who's specifically focused on the brain and the mind, then everything's a brain problem and everything's a mind problem. Or you've got someone focused specifically on the body and then everything's a body problem. Or everything's a psyche problem or whatever. And everything's seen through that lens. The beauty of having all those things going on and not having to stay within a particular doctrine intellectually or academically, I can step back and go, oh, all of this makes sense.
Right.
So I feel like what Mind Change has done for people is take all of the work out of it for you.
Now, it does have the word mind in it, right?
It does, because that's where I started.
Right.
I realized how much the mind is the conductor of the whole thing.
Right. But it's not just about the brain.
No. And I realized that over time. And that was through my own blocks when I hit a few blocks. I was like, my body is definitely a part of this whole equation, and it's not just coming from the mind. And I'll tell you, actually, when this really hit for me was when I was studying birth, actually, and realized that the heart beats first before the brain is formed.
So you're saying that the synapses of the neurons in the heart are are happening prior to the brain.
That's not the way I would have put it at first. But in the study, I remember reading that and then reading over it and like, yeah, of course, and then stopping and going, wait, what the heck? If the heart beats without the brain's permission, because I used to have this famous line of like, the body can't do anything without the mind's permission, the brain's permission.
Brain's permission.
Right.
Right.
And so then I was like, oh no, what does that mean? And luckily, there's a whole institute out there, Heart Math Institute, that they focus on the heart. And I was like, okay, I need to take this course now. So taking a heart math course and realizing, oh, goodness me, there is a whole other brain that we need to be thinking about.
Right. And this whole idea of mind change, I mean, the mind or whatever, it really does encompass all parts of us, right? Because even if there's other parts of us like the heart that beats first and all of that, everything does eventually, right? For now, when we're working on ourselves now, everything does funnel through everything else, which means you change one part of the mind. And of course, the mind is the brain at work, right? So it's when things are working, it's funneling through that.
Right. So we learned that. And then we're like, ooh, we've got to inform our practice a little bit more with that.
Right.
Then through the amazing Dr. Zach Bush, coming up with all this gut biome stuff and all the stuff that was happening there, I'm like, oh, we have a brain in our gut too. We're dealing with 3 brains actually, folks. And if we're doing mind change and we're putting all of this emphasis on the brain, we have 3 that we need to be considering. And if we want to be well, not just a lack of uncomfortable symptoms. That's
Right.
not what wellness means to me anymore.
Right.
If we want to be well, like balanced and living our best life and clued in and present and all the things that I honestly didn't know were possible before. I had no framework for it.
Mentally, emotionally, nutritionally, I mean, everything,
Yeah, then we need to consider all things. And that's what mind change does. It gives us the power to go through all of those different avenues and let them all speak and balance those out.
Love it.
So yeah, it's been quite a journey. And it went from a few friends to more and more and more people. And I had spent an enormous amount of money doing all of the research that I had done and taking all the courses and classes and getting certified in all these different things, and realized like, oh my goodness, this could be, I need to somehow balance this out. And so just started taking donations, from people of like, hey, if this helps, and then it came to where it was all I was doing. It was all that I was doing. And realized more people need to know about this.
Well, and you'd always been in the business of wanting to help people. That was just part of your makeup, right? But all the different ways in your past that you've helped people, even from the time of being a child and helping your brother, whatever, like all these different things culminated to, oh my goodness, there's an even more effective way to help people, not momentarily, but in a trajectory that's going to transform their past, present, and future. Which, if you're wondering how things transform your past, at some point we'll talk about the quantum mechanics of all of this stuff and just the craziness that's there. But yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing. And so first wrote the book because I want everyone to have this information. We're not trying to hide anything or capitalize on anything in that way. It's all out there. But what we have realized again over the years is some people want more. Yeah. I've had hundreds of people write and send messages saying, I read the book and it changed my life.
People that, called in for a consult and then, okay, we'll get you in next month. And then they call back and they're like, actually, I don't need a consult anymore. I don't need sessions because the book has just changed me, right?
Yes. Where I was shocked.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was so great. But then again, there's people that need more help.
Sure.
Which I would have been one of those people, I feel like. So we started to develop the Mind Change business, and so that we could do more to help more people. And we'll do a whole episode on your journey. And
I wanted someone to help me too, but
or at first you had
developed the self-work, right? We had to
there was
test it out.
Lots of resistance in
the
beginning.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, but it just kind of has blossomed from there. And we've got a wonderful, thriving business. We have trained practitioners. We're training more practitioners. And we want more people to know.
Yeah.
Still, there's just too much out there. And now there's a lot. And the trauma conversation has boomed in the last
number of years.
Yeah, 5 years really is. Everyone now is speaking this trauma language,
being trauma informed and talking about their past,
and yet we are still seeing people even more stuck than ever. Now people know the language around it's my trauma, but it's now that story's keeping them stuck,
because understanding problems doesn't necessarily change anything, right? Understanding what happened to us and how we perceived as a child or as an adult or anything is a wonderful first step of awareness. And that's important.
Is key. Sure.
But then what?
Right. And then the lasting change. We want there to be lasting change for people, and not that it just shifts to another, it's like the work that we do with addiction is to just shift the addiction from alcohol or pills or porn or something to another addiction isn't true freedom.
No, it's coping.
It's shifting your coping mechanisms. Now, if you can get underneath the why of the coping, the how we're doing it, then we can undo those blocks and rewire that wiring to where addiction isn't a needed coping mechanism at all anymore.
Yeah, stop cutting off the tips and get to the root, right?
Absolutely.
And then something different can actually grow.
Yes.
And so, as we're kind of formulating and helping people understand what mind change is and who it's for, anyone, whether that's, needing to overcome something, whether that's leveling up and getting to that next step, whatever it is, maybe you can just share for a moment, what is this podcast going to entail, right? Because there's going to be times where we'll come on here and banter about a topic. And then there's going to be times where you'll just be on and sharing some different things. But tell me a little bit more about your plan.
Right. So in the beginning, I envisioned all of these like wonderful experts that we've, borrowed from coming on, and, and I think that will come. I think that what I realized first, though, was we need to educate people about mind change. We need people to know that there's hope and there's help and that it can be very fast.
And it needs to be many people's testimonies and stories, and not just coming from like this one expert or this one person, right?
Right. Well, also, a lot of times I learned amazing things from these experts about what was happening, but not how to change it. So that's the thing. Like, these are amazing people. But for instance, for me, Joe Dispenza's stuff, he was clearly getting all this amazing, these amazing results with people through meditation.
Right.
When I would sit down to meditate, it was like trauma fest. Like all my stuff would come up. It was worse for me. I needed something before that. I needed tools to help clear the trauma that was coming up whenever I got quiet.
Right.
And so still amazing stuff, but I needed those tools from beforehand. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to share with the world so many of the amazing stories of freedom, of health, of well-being, of leveling up, so that like someone can see themselves in one of these stories.
Yes.
So no matter where you're coming from, no matter where you think you're stuck or you're broken or it's not ever going to work for me, I guarantee you we have someone, probably multiple someones, who were where you were that are no longer there. And the pattern that they followed and the tools and steps that they used are accessible for you.
And not just behavior changes or, oh, look, this person now is, living a great life. It's like their old life, their old being, their old junk, their old trauma. It cannot be accessed in their brain or their body, which is really cool.
It's so cool. So we're not just like, hey, okay, we're going to find better ways for you to cope around this.
Or to feel better about.
Right. You're going to hear this, although I know it's so hard to believe, but we'll have people on who will share this story with you. It's so gone. They have a hard time remembering what was wrong in the first place or what the problem was in the first place.
Or they say, oh, well, this was never really a problem. And their spouse is like, do you not remember? And they're like, no, it wasn't. They'll argue about it. It wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's not for them anymore. And that's amazing.
Yeah. We'll share. I believe we will have these people on, but it's a great story. We were just talking to this couple the other day, and he was laughing because he was sharing this story. He said that he was saying to his wife, he was getting prepared for a speech that he was doing. He was going to do a talk. And he said out loud, he said, I'm so glad I'm doing this. I've always wanted to be a public speaker. And his wife nearly passed out. She was like, are you kidding me? Because legitimately one of the things he came to us for and that he was working on was a incredible fear of public speaking.
I was terrified.
Terrified. And so that is how much things can change.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, we're excited about where this podcast is going to go, where it's going to take us. We're so thankful for all the people that are going to be listening in.
And there's more. There's going to be more. We're going to be talking about more things, emotional drivers behind common diseases and ailments. So we're going to cover so many things. And I just want to have people listen, subscribe, send us messages. What do you want us to talk about? We really want this to be their podcast, right? Like the world's podcast. Like you give us the information you want us to cover. Let us know what you want answers about, and we will give them to you. And we'll share so many wonderful victory stories. And we're just so excited to have you guys listening or watching and be part of the Mind Change family.
Yeah, just building the community. Excellent. All right.
Episode 1. Done
Thanks
and
for tuning in.
dusted.